47th president. What a week it has been.
Absolutely.
I've been studying politics since the failed Carter administration, which I thought would be the worst presidency of my lifetime until the past 4 years. And what an amazing start Trump has had. This is what happens when you have been beaten up by the system, but you get a chance to counterpunch.
Yes.
Amazing fellow. I'm a teacher at the Coeur d'Alene Charter Academy, and my vocation is to teach the history of Western civilization. And when Beverly asked me to speak, she said that I could talk about anything I wanted. And I thought about the lessons that I teach my sophomores about communism. Now, there are people in this room, no doubt, that can tell me details about communism that I've never learned. But I would like to share with you what I teach my students. And then afterwards, if you have something to add, if you have a correction that you'd like to make, anything like that, please be my guest to do so. I also have this, because I was told I had 40 minutes to speak, and I do not want to waste your time beyond that. So, what is that book, sir, before I...
This is the North Korean philosophy of their communism. I am the God of you.
That is Kim Jong-un's statement justifying the fact that they believe that the man doesn't perform human bodily functions, that the man is not a man at all, he's a demigod. My word. Thank you for bringing that. Okay, so communism is not the first aspect of Western civilization that is self-critical. In fact, early Christianity was an example of a movement beyond state power that allowed people to look at life with a different set of priorities. And for 300 years, the Roman Empire tried to crush the Christian faith. And the more they tried to crush it, the more it spread. But the Christian faith, like the Jewish faith before it, was dedicated not to an aspect of human ambition. It was dedicated to a transcendent concept of God. In the Middle Ages, outside forces that wanted to criticize the society that was usually took the form of peasant uprisings. The worst of them happened in southern France, the Albigensian Crusade, where a group of people called the Cathari, who were led by a bunch of dissident priests and former Crusader knights, decided that private property was evil, that God and the devil were co-evil. In other words, they advocated something like Persian Zoroastrianism or dualism, and they said that a new society should be formed without property, without family, basically their version of pure communism. And it took most of the powers of Europe to crush it. Saint Dominic founded the Dominican Order of Preachers in order to try to prevent such wrong theology from gaining control of too many Christians again. So here we have the society and a self-critical aspect of Western civilization criticizing it. The most dramatic of the pre-industrial criticisms of mainline Western civilization, though, come during the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, the intensity of the philosophy got more and more and more radical. The Jacobins, led by a guy named Maximilien Robespierre, ultimately said that terror without virtue is monstrous, but virtue without terror is useless. What Robespierre meant by virtue was a society unlike anything that had evolved naturally. A society that came like Athena from the forehead of the cognoscenti, of the intellectuals. A society that was redesigned according to what they considered to be rational lines. And the only way that they could make this society work was by the guillotine, in the terror. Viewing humanity like a topiary, like a tree, a bonsai tree. When it grows naturally, you trim it into shape, into the shape that you have preordained, into the shape that you want. And the Albigensians, the Jacobins, all believed that society as it has grown up is wrong, fundamentally inhumane. No doubt the bishop in Washington would agree with what they said, which is that we can build a new society, a better society. Communism springs from the early phase of industrialism. And that early phase is a time when nobody understands the world that's being built, because the industrial world is a world like no other. All of the systems of political governance were built in pre-industrial times. The governments were at that time trying to prevent another French Revolution, and they were advocating as much stasis as possible. But they had no idea how to deal with industrial production and the changes to everything from the way cities were designed to how quickly people moved. I mean, the invention of the printing press had brought about the Protestant Reformation, well, along with other things, because suddenly knowledge could travel much more quickly than anyone had ever imagined it could. Well, now everything is like Gutenberg's press. In the early 1800s, in Britain and Northwest Europe and in New England, you have a society being built, not according to throne, altar, field, which is the way pre-industrial societies around the world have been built, around the throne, which is sanctified by their religion, wherever you are in the world, around the altar, which is the religion itself, which coheres people into common beliefs, and around the field, where 70 to 90% of the people labor so that 10 to 30% of the people can eat and do things other than growing food. That pre-industrial way of life, which we call feudalism, nothing from it made sense in the industrial world. People had no security about what they were going to do 5 years from now, even 1 year from now. Every job was new. The cities were filled with coal, smoke, and pollution. The answers that the priests and that the kings offered were simply insufficient to the problems of this new world. So a German who never worked a day in his life, who was in fact supported by Friedrich Engels, who was a factory owner, a German who proclaimed everything for the proletariat, the factory workers, the industrial workers of the world, Karl Marx, comes up with a crystallization of this anti-Western, anti-establishment, self-critical aspect of Western civilization that the Albigensians and the Jacobins had represented before. He designs a new way of thinking for this new era. And because the West is susceptible, because none of the old institutions had yet adapted to industrial times, Marx was remarkably successful. I hate admitting it, but Marx's ideas are the most important ideas of the last 200 years. Not because they're good, but because they're influential. So, where does Marx get his, there's a specter haunting Europe, the specter of communism, which he writes leading off the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Well, he gets it from a reasonable criticism of the traumas of the early industrial age, but he also gets it from a philosopher called Hegel. Hegel argues that history, progress, comes from conflict. Everything that exists that's in and of itself is a thesis. I'm a thesis, you're a thesis, our political organization is a thesis. And somewhere out in the world there is an antithesis, the equal and opposite of who we are, of what we believe. In the course of human events, theses and antitheses meet, and they conflict, and they try to destroy one another. And Hegel argues that what results from this is synthesis. That whoever wins the struggle, whether it's thesis or antithesis, that they will take the best aspect of both thesis and antithesis and produce a new synthesis. And then in the course of time, that becomes the thesis, it meets its own antithesis, and there is more conflict. Now that's Hegel. And Hegel's idea that conflict brings progress is going to inform revolutionary communists and socialists for the next 200 years. There is not a desire on the part of any communist to work within our system. They wish to destroy our system. They wish to replace our system. You cannot negotiate with communists because communists don't want to negotiate with you. They don't want parity. They don't want compromise. They want it all. Because another aspect of communism that Marx doesn't talk about much, but that's very much there, is millenarianism. Millenarianism is an aspect of most religions. In Judaism, millenarianism is the belief that the current era is absolutely terrible, irredeemably so, and that the Messiah will come in the day of the Lord, and the world that is will burn, will be purged, and God's true people will be left and will live 1,000 years of peace, heaven on earth, and God will then conclude history. Christians tend to believe in the second coming of Christ. We have Judgment Day. So the world that is a world that is fallen, a world fraught by sin, a world fraught by suffering. But Christ will come, this time with purging fire, and it will be suffering and woe betide a pregnant woman in those days. And then, after the world is cleansed and God's purpose through history has been fulfilled, there'll be the New Jerusalem, 1,000 years of peace, heaven on earth, and God will fulfill his purpose. Among the Muslims, the world that is awful. There'll be the Mahdi, the Islamic Messiah who will come. And on the day of Haqq, their judgment day, this world will be purged by fire, and there will be God's perfected paradise. Well, communism is a religion. It's a theocracy. It has saints, it has martyrs, it has a holy book, it has dogma, and it is completely intolerant of other religions. Communism views the world, and Marx views the world in a historical way. Marx, and as a historian and a history teacher, I appreciate this. It's a broken clock moment, even a broken clock, an analog clock with arms, not a digital clock, but an analog clock is correct twice a day, even if it's broken, because time will move through. So even Marx has something correct about what he says. History is important. So Marx argues a millenarian version of history. After savagery, there was the age of feudalism. And the age of feudalism is an age of an oppressed peasantry under the heels of an aristocracy of violence and of superstition. The peasantry is dispersed throughout the countryside, and they work for the greater good of their betters. And the noblemen among the aristocrats rule through violence because their job is to be soldiers, protectors of society. And the priests, they rule through superstition, according to Marx, by convincing people that this life is a transient one, that the true life will come in the afterlife, and if you take it and take it and take it and comply and comply and comply in this life, then you'll get paradise afterwards. This pre-industrial world of feudalism was changed by entrepreneurs, by people who looked at the way we do things, the way we produce things, the way we serve one another, and said, I can do better than that. I have a better idea. I can make things happen collectively. I can make things happen in a factory, get rid of these cottage industries, coalesce production in a single standardized fashion. Use the same machinery to produce a standard product of high quality. Bring workers in, make them use the best methods. Use the rail systems and the canal systems before them to move raw materials to these factories and move finished products out. And these entrepreneurs produced the second age of history, the age of capitalism, the age of moneyism. And this age of capitalism, according to Marx, produces the necessary, indispensable means of production. And the necessary, indispensable means of production are factories. With factories, Marx understands, we can produce a material paradise. So, entrepreneurs the people from towns, the bourgeoisie, create the means of production that are the factories. And in doing so, they bring peasants in and change them into proletarians. They bring peasants in and change them into workers. Unlike the peasants, these workers are physically concentrated in cities, near factories. Unlike the peasants, these workers are not traditional. They are technically savvy. They have to be in order to do their jobs. And unlike peasants, they are used to working together in concert to be more than the sum of their parts. And this is Marx's key to the millennium. The Communist Party, according to him, is the priesthood of a paradise on earth. And that priesthood will awaken the proletarians, the workers of the world, to class consciousness, to the idea that it doesn't matter what you speak, it doesn't matter what totem you worship, it doesn't matter whether you're educated or not, whether you're rural or not. What matters is what you do and how much money you make. And if you are unified with other people who do basically the same sorts of work and make the same basic amount of money, if you make common cause with other workers like you, if you awaken them to their class consciousness, you can awaken them to the dialectical struggle between the world that is, the world of free market capitalism, and the world that might be the 1,000 years of peace, the millennium of pure communism. And all that is necessary for that to happen is the revolution. Now, understand how different this is from Christianity, from liberal democracy, which are both pre-industrial ideas. In fact, any pre-industrial civilization or culture around the world understands things that we have forgotten. Number one, human nature is suspect. Humans are not born good. Humans have to learn good. Virtue is something you choose and usually you sacrifice for. But Marxists and other industrial age social scientists view human nature as something trustworthy. Have you met people? Do you know what they're like? People can try to be good. Individuals can be good. But societies, groups of people always go to the lowest common denominator, which is selfishness and pragmatism. Communists are utopian. They actually believe that we, mortal creatures, can imagine a perfected society and can imagine a perfected man and woman. They didn't get into gender stuff back in Marx's time. And by imagining what a perfect society and a perfect man or woman would be, being smart and hardworking and dedicated and oh so virtuous, they would design a way from our fallen world to their perfected world, from our fallen human nature, our original sin, to their perfect world. And the leader and the party and the revolution would make all of that possible. Utopianism is profoundly antithetical to anything from pre-industrial times in any continent on Earth. Because pre-industrial people knew to be suspicious of human nature, and they knew that finite people cannot create something perfect, which is infinite. If any one of us were given the power of God on Earth, God forbid, and we were able to design a perfected world with every good intention, if it was your perfect world, I would live in hell along with everyone else. Because as good as you are not God. You cannot imagine a world that is perfect for me as it would be for you. None of us can. Ultimately, another characteristic of communism is it is static. You imagine a perfect situation, a millennium, 1,000 years of peace, a utopia, which by the way means nowhere. Literally, that's what utopia means, nowhere. My students ask, what would I think utopia is? The U.S. Constitution. Because the U.S. Constitution is not about an end result. It is not about a society that has achieved perfection. It is not static. The Constitution allows individuals to express themselves, individuals to act independently, individuals to be free. And it prevents any government, any religion, any organization from impinging upon that freedom in the name of some virtue that somebody else has foisted on them. My perfection is what we live in, a world of limited government, a world of personal opportunity, a world of imagination and creativity, and a world where people can choose to worship the God that they are drawn to and live faithfully to that God without interference from the government. Another aspect of this communism, this utopia, is the idea that if it ain't matter, it don't matter. If you can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it, it's real. If it is material, it is real. But communists draw inspiration from materialists who say, we have a brain but not a mind. We have a body but not a soul. And all that we have and all that we are is physical. It is material. So when communists argue for utopia, they are arguing for a material utopia. They are materialistic. Pre-industrial people knew better. Anyone who's been out in a thunderstorm understands God exists. Or at least they understand that there are powers in this universe greater than our vanity, greater than our concept. That we live in a universe that was built for us, not a universe that is ours. But communists say, no, it's material, and we're going to fix the material world. We are utopians. We believe that we can make a better world. What are you, a negative person? Do you deny that we can make a better world? Are you evil? Are you with them, the capitalists? So, communists also are modernists. They have this notion that the new is always improved, like on advertising. There's a single word in many commercials, at least from when I was young. New and improved. New and improved, as if it's one word. N-E-W-N-I-M-P-R-O-V-E-D, new and improved. And so communists are modernists. They assume that anything that exists that is old is like Darwinian evolution. It's past, it's obsolete. That new ideas are always better. Well, I didn't agree with him about everything, but Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense under Presidents Ford and Bush, did say that there are many ideas out there that are exciting and earth-shattering and new and totally wrong and utterly stupid. Traditionalists, and this is pre-industrial traditionalists, understand that new ideas, yes, propose them, but they have to be tested against the tried and true ideas of the past, because the past worked. The past works. It functions. The institutions that have evolved through the centuries are institutions that come from hard experience. These idealized communist visions of a better world, they are not, in fact, tried and true. They're unproven. Well, actually, after 150 years after Marx, they've been tried. They've been proven to be the most deadly idea in human history. Communism, the idea that you can use operant psychological conditioning, punishment and reward to tell people to be better people, to make them more virtuous, to use terror like Robespierre to make people so afraid that if you say, bonjour, madame, bonsoir, monsieur, you could be executed by guillotine because the proper address during the high point of the French Revolution was citoyen. Instead of, good morning, mister, good evening, madam, or whatever it is I said, you had to say, good morning, citizen, good afternoon, citizen, or, good evening, tovarish, good evening, comrade. And anyone who didn't do that actually was, in the high terror of the French Revolution, subject to guillotining. You get people so worked up, so afraid, Robespierre thought, and Marx thought, and many of the communists that have come since thought, if you get people so ginned up with fear, you break their old self, like Humpty Dumpty. That'll never come back together again. And instead, what you do is you build a new Soviet man. You build a new kind of person, a new human nature, suitable for the new utopia. So all of these things come together in the communist revolution. And what they produce is a religion. that calls all other religions superstition, that calls all other religions the opiate of the masses, that calls all other ways of thinking. I'm going to close this a little bit just because I'm vain and I want you to see me, and I also want my wife to be able to film me so I can put this on YouTube. I hope that helps. Again, vain.
It's this one over there.
Oh, well,
I don't think you can do anything about the door.
no, I can't do anything about the door. I'll just try to stay out of it. Sorry. So, what is the revolution according to Marx? Well, it never happened the way Marx predicted. Marx predicted that the workers would take control of the factories, like in a sit-down strike, and that the workers in this sit-down strike would trade with one another and make sure that the factory workers and their families, who basically literally occupied the factories like fortresses, that those factory workers would be fed and clothed and have everything they need. Meanwhile, the evil parasitic bourgeois, the capitalists, would starve. And at some point, the capitalists and the priests and the nobles and the soldiers and everyone else would come begging for the workers to let them in and let them into this new supply chain. And the workers would, and the party and the leader would say, only if you give up your property, your identity, your claims on anything, only if you become us in thought, word, and deed. Well, that's what Marx imagined. Marx also imagined this would happen in Germany, or at least in a very highly industrialized country. Communism has never arisen in an industrialized country. Communism arises in peasant societies. Russia, under the Tsar, had some small industrial areas, but it was a peasant society. China, a peasant society during the communist revolution there. And the same is true of Cuba and everywhere else communism has worked. It's never played out the way Marx suggested. But that's because all of these neat ideas, these theories, these terms, that's just pillow talk, baby. Excuse my vulgarity, but it is. On television, there are people who make great hay, and in classrooms, in high schools and college. What is the distinction between a social democrat and a communist and an anarcho-syndicalist? And the truth is, it doesn't matter. Because the differences between a social democrat and a communist and an anarcho-syndicalist are not about goals. They're about the means to achieve those goals. So whether you call it communism or Marxism-Leninism or Stalinism, or, as you see on the top of your second page, Xi Jinping thought for communism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, which is actually what they call communism these days in China. Because Xi Jinping wants to resurrect Mao, and we'll talk about that. Whatever it is, here are some of the great ideas of this communist theology, of how they get through the revolution to the perfected world. The holy book of communism is Das Kapital, which means the money. So what is it that Marx says is at the center of life? It's the money. I really hate seeing you with the glare. Do you want to move? I mean, you can sit anywhere you want. If you want, I can move to the back of the room and you can look that way. What?
It's very sparkly.
Okay. You look like you're in pain. Okay. You too. But okay. Just feel free to move around and sit wherever you want. So Das Kapital is this thick scriptural tome that explains how the world works according to Marx. And he talks about the four social classes, the peasantry, the nobles, the proletariat, and the bourgeoisie. He talks about how class struggle is important. He talks about how religion is the opiate of the masses. He talks about the ages of feudalism, capitalism, the revolution, and then the pure age of socialism, the means of production, the dictatorship of the proletariat is, in Marx's ideas, when the factory workers have this stranglehold on production, but in reality it is a totalitarian police state. Every time communism has been tried, the dictatorship of the proletariat is 14-year-old red guards going around with little red books and Kalashnikov rifles, killing anyone who doesn't fit the mold that Mao has set out.
Red guards.
Amen. Amen. Capital is money. Instead of profit, they have surplus value. Instead of paying stockholders, you pay off everyone in the production line. And what makes communism work, what makes it a successful political ideology, is they get rid of the parlor pink socialists. They get rid of the debating society people. As a KGB colonel once said, I forget his name, the first people we put up against a wall after the revolution are the professors. Because the professors blather, blah, 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 blah. They talk. They think they're communists. No, no, no. Real communists have iron party discipline. You're a beautiful young woman or man, and the KGB or whatever the Chinese Secret Service today says, you will go to the West. You will find a dorky physicist. You will seduce that dorky physicist. You will turn that dorky physicist into your source of information, and you will give us whatever that dorky physicist has. You're modest? You wish to save yourself? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to put your scruples, your individual scruples, your personal sense of morality ahead of the revolution? Communism requires that we give our all. You too. And if the party tells you to go use your body and use your wiles to seduce the dorky physicist, to take his stuff, to use and manipulate him and throw him out, then you do it. Or you give up your party membership. And, well, you know what happens to people of the land. You know what happens to people who are not members of the party. They get lost. They end up getting trodden underfoot. Maybe they go to a gulag. Maybe they get organ harvested like in communist China today. But something will happen. So one of the things that communists do is they force you to do, so the mafia does the same thing, called making your bones. They force you to do something that's against your conscience. And once you've done something little against your conscience, it's easier to violate your conscience again and again and again. And this produces an iron discipline. Communism is an army. Like Martin Luther wrote, in a mighty fortress is our God. The world is a struggle. Not for God. God has no problem with Satan. Satan's a creature of God, a rebellious one, but a creature of God. There is no duality. There is no equality. But for human beings, evil's a problem. So we've got to treat our faith like a war, Luther writes, and Ignatius of Loyola would have agreed with him, did agree with him. Communists view the world in the same way. This life isn't about happiness. It's not about personal fulfillment. It's about fulfilling the millenarian dream, fulfilling the revolution by any means. And if a communist can flatter you into agreeing with him, he will. And if a communist can seduce you through her wiles, she will. And if a communist can trick you into some intellectual maze where true communism has never been tried yet, and all the people who've tried it around the world are just bad people, they will do whatever is necessary to achieve victory. It's not about the means. It's all about the ends. Are there good people who are communists? Sure. Because they are true believing communists. They actually believe in the revolution and in true communism to come, the millennium, the 1,000 years of peace. They think that good then requires absolute